In this video, we're going to try to install the inner tie rod end on your Subaru Legacy located on your steering rack. Using a 19mm thin wall socket, I'm going to go ahead, loosen and remove our lug nuts and our locking key. Go ahead and grab that wheel, remove it, and set it aside. Once you have your wheel removed, I'm going to go ahead and spray down our components here with some rust penetrant. And let this soak for a little bit. Now we're going to use a 19mm wrench. We want to go ahead and loosen this jam nut. Ideally, what you want is this nut to be spinning freely of the inner tie rod. And just going to back that up a little bit. Now right here, our tie rod end is going to come up through our knuckle, and there's a cotter pin holding this as a security piece, locking that nut in. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this cotter pin. I'm just using a pair of cutters here. You can use regular pliers. I'm going to start by bending out the legs here on this. Just kind of line those up, push them down. And ideally, I'm going to try and pull this cotter pin out whole. Now, cotter pins are a one-time use, so we're not going to be reusing this. Sometimes if you can get that caught with the cutters, you can pinch it and rock it. Pinch and pull. There we go. I was able to get that out. Now let's go ahead and loosen this nut. Now I'm going to use a 17mm socket on my ratchet. Now you can use an impact gun if you want to. Now that we've broken it free, I'm going to go ahead and use my impact gun, and we're going to go ahead and loosen this probably about 2/3 of the way up, but we're going to leave it attached. All right, well, the nut came off. I'm just going to go ahead and thread that back on. Just a few threads. Now we're going to use this nut as a capture nut. We're going to go ahead and separate our outer tie rod end from the knuckle. And we're going to go ahead and strike the knuckle right here, and that should release this tie rod end. Now that we have this loose, I'm going to go ahead and remove that nut. And we could drop this out. Now before we unthread this here, I'm going to recommend that you go ahead and grab a crayon or even a piece of paper with a pen, something to write on. We're going to go ahead and count the amount of revolutions that this takes to remove off of our inner tie rod end. That was 10. I'm going to go ahead and take this crayon, and I'm simply going to write that 10. You can write it anywhere. I'm going to write it on the inside of my fender well. You can write on a piece of paper or anything like that, so you go ahead and remember that. Now let's go ahead and unthread the jam nut here. If you want to, you can put a socket on there and your impact gun and zip that off, but it doesn't take much longer to go ahead and unthread that by hand. Now if you follow the inner tie rod and up, there is a clamp right here. I'm simply going to use a pair of pliers. I'm going to pinch that and pull that off and remove it. Now if you follow the inner tie rod up here to the steering rack, the boot itself is held onto the steering rack with this clamp. It's a one-time use, so we just got to pop it off. I'm going to use a screwdriver with a notch in it, put it right inside that little crimped loop, and give it a few whacks. Pop it off and remove it. You can go ahead and toss that out. Next thing you want to do is go ahead and grab a hold of this boot, and we can start to pull that off. Now let's go ahead and push this off. Sometimes you can use your screwdriver to go ahead and get in there and work that off. Now I want to go ahead and take this boot, and we're going to push off the inner tie rod all the way to the very end. Now our boot is a little bit stuck here. I'm going to go ahead and use my pocket screwdriver and spray this with some solvent to try and just kind of get that to free up a little bit. Sometimes the solvent will help it slide. There it is. Now right here is our steering rack shaft, and on the end of it is our inner tie rod. Now if I go to the passenger side wheel and I go ahead and manually crank this, our goal is to go ahead and get that inner tie rod exposed right here. Now I'm going to use a pair of large pliers here to go ahead and grab the inner tie rod end here. And let's go ahead and loosen that. And we should be able to unthread that just like that. It should be coming off with this lock washer right here. Now we just removed our inner tie rod here, and I'm going to go ahead and grab that passenger side wheel and bring that over just a little bit. You can see the end of the steering rack shaft right here. Now the replacement component does not come with that locking washer, so we're applying some blue thread locker to the end of our tie rod end here, and we're going to thread that in. Now the only reason why I cranked that wheel in is so that you can see what it's threading into. Once that's bottomed out, I'm going to go ahead and tighten this down. And you do want to make sure that it's good and snug. I do want to make sure that where the boot goes is nice and clean and free of any debris. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a small bristle brush and clean that. Now that we have this installed and tight, I'm going to go ahead and crank this back in. I'm now going to take the supplied grease packet here. I'm going to tear off a corner, and I want to put some of this grease, or actually all of the grease, right inside the joint here. Get and press that in. Work that into that joint, and go ahead and rotate that inner tie rod, working that grease into that joint. Go ahead and pack that right in there. Now let's go ahead and slide our boot on. Go ahead and take the boot, slide that down. And we do want to get that popped onto the steering rack, like so. You want to make sure that it's on all the way. We're going to replace that band clamp with this tie strap. Go ahead and use the pliers. We're going to tighten that. And once that's good and tight, just snip off the excess. Now from the other side, I'm going to go ahead and crank that steering rack. That should set us up right here. Now there's a groove right here on the inner tie rod where this pretty much falls into position. I'm going to take a tie strap. Go ahead and take our tie strap and run that on there. Use your pliers to go ahead and make sure that's good and tight. Snip off the excess. Take your jam nut. Go ahead and thread that down. Go ahead and thread your inner tie rod on. Now once that catches, we're going to count 10 turns. And then we'll run our jam nut down. That's going to set us up with our preliminary alignment. Okay, remove our ball joint nut. And we can now install this into our knuckle. Go ahead and take your tie rod end, push that up into the knuckle, and get that nut started. Using a 19mm socket, you want to go ahead and snug this down. Just snug it gently. Now I want to get and torque this down to 19 foot-pounds. Now you have two types of nuts here. You have a lock nut that has a nylon lock ring on the inside, or you're going to have the nut with a notch in it, the castle nut, where you would use a cotter pin to lock and secure that. This particular one is the nylon lock nut. Either one, you need to go ahead and torque to 19 foot-pounds. Now the next thing you want to do is we need to go ahead and tighten this nut in an additional 60 degrees. I'm going to show you how to do that. Okay, so we have to tighten this nut in an additional 60 degrees. Now 90 degrees is going to be a full quarter turn. We need to tighten this just a little bit shy of that, not quite a 45, which would be in the middle there, but 60 degrees. Now let's go ahead and mark the nut, so now we know when we hit our 60-degree mark. So I'm going to use a marker here, and I'm going to mark right here. Now 90 degree would be if I mark this right here, and this red mark would be tightened all the way over to here. We only have to come over probably to about right here. I'm going to mark this on the knuckle. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to tighten this nut until we get to our 60-degree mark right there on the knuckle, and then we'll be good. And go ahead and check that periodically. We're getting pretty close. There we go. Now, this is using a nylon lock nut style nut. If you have the cotter pin style with the castle nut, what you want to do is once you get to that 60-degree mark, go ahead and see if you can put that cotter pin in through the notch. If it does not line up, continue to tighten the nut just a little bit more in small increments until that notch in the castle nut lines up with the hole in the stud itself, and then install the cotter pin. Never loosen the nut to get that cotter pin to line up. Once you get that cotter pin in, go ahead and fold over those tabs. Don't forget to tighten down your jam nut here. So thread that down. And we want to go ahead and snug this. Make sure it's good and tight. And once that's tight, you want to go ahead and make sure that your tie rod end here is level. So simply grab that and just kind of twist that until the tie rod end is level with the knuckle itself. Now that we've installed the component, install your wheel. Don't forget to bring it down to your local alignment shop to go ahead and get that all adjusted, and you're all set. Go ahead and take your wheel. Get that lined up on the studs. Ideally, you want to go ahead and get all of the lug nuts started by hand first, and then we'll come on back and snug them down. We just want to gently snug these. Do this in a crisscross or star pattern. Now let's go ahead and torque them. You want to get and torque down your lug nuts to 88 foot-pounds. Ideally, you want to do this in a crisscross or star pattern. And you're all set.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.